it's going to be very, very chilly, both Monday, Tuesday, even throughout the rest of next week. We're looking at some pretty bitter wind chills. Anything that falls will likely stick around for a little bit, and that's why I think Monday we could also have potentially some refreeze concerns. So that's something we're going to be watching here again into early next week. All right. Any current questions? Let's see here. Let me know if you can hear me okay. 7:34 here on this Wednesday evening. All right, so here's the winter storm watch that the National Weather Service put out again earlier this afternoon. They are mentioning that it still could be expanded. You see, at this point, it's for those far northern counties that are included in that blue shaded color contour right there. Ellijay, Canton, Gainesville, Helen, Rome, all of those locations are included right now. But the key thing with that, though, is that asterisk I put on there that it could be expanded farther to the south. Metro Atlanta, Carrollton, even down to the south there of the city itself, we could potentially see this expanded a little bit more. So that's something we're going to be keeping our eyes on. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to post them here on YouTube. We appreciate you joining on this Wednesday evening. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Anthony Baglione. The entire team has been watching this system very closely, and I got to tell you, it's been an interesting one to track here over the past week or so. We started watching the model trends here this past weekend, showing significant icing, significant winter weather impacts, and then it's really remained here through this entire week. We've seen some subtle shifts, and so that's something we're going to talk about here in a second. But as far as the impacts are concerned, our messaging has been pretty much the same. So with that said, there is the winter storm watch. Let us talk here about the timing on this system, again, as we get into the weekend mainly. 7 o'clock Saturday morning, and so if you're a weather weenie, we like to follow this pretty closely. This is what we call the European model. It usually has a pretty good track record as far as the strength, kind of the timing, all of the above with this system. And so I want to show you this one first. We're going to look at a couple different models and kind of where this could potentially go wrong or changes we could see with this. Let's look here as we go into Saturday evening. There is 9 p.m. Saturday evening. I know lots of people, of course, it's your Saturday evening, like to just enjoy it, be busy. What I would say is this weekend is not a good weekend to be doing that. I would highly encourage you to be inside, hunkered down, just enjoy maybe a movie or something this Saturday because of this icing potential starting to come through late this evening. Let me check comments here. Going to be the impact for Cobb County. So let's talk about that here. I'm going to put this forward in motion as we go through Saturday night. I'll pause this at about 6 o'clock Sunday morning. So this is the latest European model, and I will say at this point, because of the warm air, relative warmth, I should say, that it is trying to introduce across the northern parts of the state, you'll see here, watch what happens as we go through Sunday afternoon. It turns this all to rain, and especially Sunday evening takes that as rain. But I would be cautious of that model. I'm going to show you another one here in just a second because that one is at least at this point taking a lot of warmth, pushing it in our direction, which may actually be a little bit overdone with that warmth at this point. Let me check comments. Good evening, Anthony. Thank you, Michael. Good to see you. All right, I'll keep watching for comments there. Let's go here through this other model. This is the American one. It's, not necessarily it doesn't have the best track record a lot of times, but it has been more consistent as far as showing that colder air sticking around and doing a decent job of that. So there is 3 p.m. Saturday, potentially some freezing rain starting at that point. We go into Saturday evening. There is 10 o'clock. Look at all of the pink showing up right there. If you have family, friends up into the Ohio Valley, even, let's say, up into Virginia, Philadelphia, they are looking at a pretty significant snowstorm. That is not going to be the case for us here in our part of the country. We are looking at either an all pretty much icing event or some rain mixing in or just straight chilly rain. I think the bulk of the models, though, indicating that we're at least going to see some freezing rain and continue to mix in. The difference with this model, look at 11 o'clock Sunday morning. It is still trying to show some warmer air getting in for our southern counties, but it's doing a better job, I think, at this point of continuing that freezing rain potential through Sunday, through early Monday, and then both of them show this is likely wrapping up into Monday, probably late morning at the latest at this point. Let's see, check comments here. I live near downtown. How bad is the wind expected to be with this storm? So that is a great question. I've seen some comments, is this going to be a blizzard for some parts of the country? Is the wind going to be a big factor? It does not look to be the case with this one. I think the wind at this point, let's say 15, 25 mile per hour gusts or so, which when you combine that with some significant ice for some areas could definitely cause some concerns. But I think the majority of us, this is not necessarily a wind event. It would be a freezing rain event or a chilly rain event, maybe some sleet mixing in, just kind of some nasty weather in that regard. Let's look at the other ones here. Do you believe coming Georgia will get a good bit of this? Yes, at least the majority of us are going to see something. So let me go back here as far as the models are concerned. I want to walk through this if you are just joining us. This is usually a pretty accurate model, the European that we follow pretty closely. It keeps us dry Saturday morning. So if you have to get something done here this weekend, Saturday morning looking okay. We go through the afternoon. Into the evening, there is 9 o'clock. We're starting to see that ice concern even, I think, as early as late afternoon. Saturday night, likely to be messy. We get into Sunday, all of us dealing with this. The caveat, again, that I've been mentioning with this model right there, it does show basically all rain for the majority of the state. I think it's overdoing the amount of warm air that's showing up, which is leading to that kind of false narrative, if you will, of straight up rain to end the weekend. Possibility of this tracking south. Michael, great question. As far as it tracking south, we can't rule out anything, right? So over the past couple of days with these model runs that we've been seeing coming in, there have been some subtle shifts north and south. It's what we call kind of a windshield wiper effect, where until we get probably here in the next day or so, the system is actually formed west of us. I think those shifts still could occur. We've been pretty consistent today as far as, you know, staying basically in those far northern areas for the worst of the freezing rain. Snow just north of Nashville, the Ohio Valley looking at a lot of snow. But those shifts are definitely still possible at this point, something we're watching pretty closely. Can we just get snow? That's a great question. I know our snow lovers unfortunately going to be very disappointed with this storm. If you would like a ton of snow, we're looking at that probably from even Cincinnati toward Philadelphia, D.C. This is going to be a significant snowstorm for some folks, not for us. Really, there's no chance of that at this point unless it shifts majorly south, which I don't expect. Yeah, no problem. So not as scary as it looked as far as not losing power for days. We're still emphasizing at this point that that is always a possibility when we are talking ice. It does not take much ice at all to cause some issues, to have isolated power outages, widespread power outages, things like that. Yes, the freezing rain totals initially were really, really high. They've come down a little bit, but I don't want you to let your guard down with thinking, oh, we're only getting, you know, this or that. And I'm going to show you here another map in just a second that might help explain that. Our impacts are still looking about the same, though, at this point. So let's go here as we go into Monday morning. The system starts to push out. That, again, was model number 1. This is the other one we look at, and I do think it's doing a better job into Sunday especially. You see the pink still showing up there. It's keeping the colder air, what we call cold air damming, or kind of a wedged right up against the Appalachian Mountains. This one, I think, is doing a better job of showing that and depicting it visually versus just taking it all and putting it to rain. There is still a freezing rain concern as we head into Sunday. Now, look as we talk about snow totals. This is one map I wanted to show you through the weekend. It has significantly trended upward for some locations. We are not looking at snow, though, for this system. Nashville, Baltimore, Columbus, Ohio, farther to our north, it is likely to be more of a significant all snowstorm. I don't expect us to get some snow. That 0.3 inches that you see that the model is picking up right there, most likely some sleet, some freezing rain. It's reading that as some straight up snow, which our temperatures are not necessarily going to support that, because with this system, the reason we may get some freezing rain is because at the surface, we're going to be close to or below freezing. Above our heads, though, there's this warm pocket that will melt anything that falls, and that's why freezing rain would likely be a concern. All right, let's check comments here. If you have any questions, concerns, let's talk about it. Feel free to post on here. Is cold high pressure is stronger, low weaker? Could we see more impacts if the low is weaker? Not necessarily. I think as far as the strength of both of those, we're getting pretty good consensus. It's more so a tiny shift to the north or tiny shift to the south. That would change as far as our impacts are concerned. More areas looking at freezing rain or less areas looking at freezing rain. We're pretty much just looking at freezing rain, maybe a few sleet pellets mixing in versus any snow with this system. What if we get only chilly rain and some bit of snow? Good question. I think as far as a bit of snow, the chances of really any snow at this point, very, very slim. There is still a possibility, yes, that first model I showed you could be leaning, toward a solution that could become accurate with chilly rain. It looks like an outlier at this point, though, but that's why we watch for the trends as we kind of get closer to this system. Looks like I bought groceries for nothing in Clayton County. Okay, so fair point. I will say, though, it is always better to be over-prepared or at least prepared versus not being prepared at all. I would still get the groceries. I would still keep things charged. I would still plan for some power outages. We are not out of the woods at all. Even if it's trended a tiny bit farther to the north, we still could be looking at some significant icing. That doesn't change those totals necessarily as of the latest update. Possible to get snow in February or March still. Always possible, for sure. It looks like at least through the rest of this month. Thank you. And then into probably early February, we're going to have a pretty chilly pattern. So I do think that's still possible. It's going to start to become harder and harder, though, as we get into the next couple months. Will the lower temperatures predicted for overnight Sunday and early Monday morning cause freezing surfaces throughout Monday? Yes. I still think Monday, that would be our primary concern. We're not going to be seeing things falling on Monday as far as more rain, more freezing rain. It's going to be that refreeze potential or anything that has fallen on those surfaces that are below freezing will likely freeze into early next week. And so I still think we could see some concerns Monday, even if rain is not necessarily still falling at that point. Do we expect the European model to change and evolve over the weekend? Good question. So as far as the European model is concerned, it usually has a really good track record. It's kind of been not as great here the past couple of model cycles because, let's go back to that. I'll show you why, and then I'll answer your question here shortly. So that model itself is introducing more warm air on Sunday. Watch what happens here as we get into Sunday. Look at all the green showing up. This model specifically has been kind of leaning toward let's get some more rain on Sunday versus freezing rain versus ice, things like that. And at this point, it's yet to be determined if this is an outlier. I think it could be. We need to wait for some more model runs as we get closer, and it certainly could still shift. Kind of just as a side note, the hurricane hunters are actually up sampling the data that is going to go into this storm, into the models that we look at. Of course, it's not hurricane season, but they're kind of going to improve the models with some current observations over the Pacific where this storm is originating from. So that should help us to get a better idea. Let's see. How long will travel be impacted after the storm comes through after Sunday? So temperatures next week still going to be a concern. So that's something we're watching. I think at least Monday could be affected. If you are trying to fly, for instance, from Atlanta to, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, even up into D.C. or something, there could be some significant travel issues for days with the amount of snow that they're expecting. Raleigh, for instance, looking at some pretty decent icing totals, as are we. We're looking at a potential for some significant ice. So I think this could for sure have kind of a ripple effect over the next couple days into early next week. Would not get an I-85 north at all. I wouldn't. I would stay home this weekend if you can. If you have to travel, leave some extra time, make precautions. If you get stranded out on the interstate, what are you going to do for this situation? Just bear that in mind. I do think we could need to be keeping that in mind. No snow in the city. At this point, it is a very, 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 very low chance of any snow in the city. This is not a snowstorm for us. It is mainly going to be an ice storm, or if something shifts, it would be a chilly rain. So that's kind of our two modes, if you will, that we're looking at. Let me take a question here that we got off of Facebook. Do you think travel impacts will stretch into Tuesday and Wednesday in Cherokee County? Tuesday, Wednesday, we should start to see some improvements. Where I would be concerned is where we still have temperatures, at freezing, below freezing, especially overnight. So mainly in the mornings, you think of getting up, going into work, school, things like that. That is where I would be concerned as far as travel impacts are concerned. There should be some progress, though, as far as the highways, things like that, once this kind of all pushes out. All right, so let me go through here. Again, that was the one model we look at. I showed you the other one. Let me go through here and show you a couple other graphics, and then I'm going to go back over here and look at questions. Thank you all, though, for tuning in here on this Wednesday evening. We're going to continue to answer questions here, hopefully clarify any and all concerns you may have as well. Here's where the snow is likely to set up. And this has kind of been pretty consistent. I would say, again, this is not going to be a snowstorm for us. Even though it is showing there on that specific model, this is what we call the European model, 0.3 of an inch of snow here in Atlanta. What it is likely picking up on is the wintry precip in the form of the ice, the sleet above our heads, and translating that as snow on this model. So some of those totals, Asheville, North Carolina, for instance, will be a little bit lower. They're expecting some significant icing as well. Nashville probably not looking at 22 inches of snow. They're going to get some icing that will cut down on some of those totals as we go into this weekend, early next week. Let's look here at the chance. I love this graphic because it is still too early. I think probably in the next day or so we can say amounts, but this is a good depiction as far as the chance of a 1/4 inch of ice or more by the time we go through this weekend. We've been highlighting those northeastern counties as having that best chance, but even though in a place like Atlanta, for instance, we're not included yet in that winter storm watch, that could change, there is still just as good of an impact potential there for some significant freezing rain as many of our other spots in our viewing area. So that is something we're watching. I do not want anybody to let their guard down and think, oh, he mentioned chilly rain, it's going to be chilly rain. I still think we're going to see freezing rain at some point during this system. It could be more prolonged, or it could be mostly Saturday night, just depending on how things verify here. Has the GFS model followed the updated Euro? Great question. No, it has been kind of pretty consistent, I would say. In fact, I'll show it to you here. Let's go back to the GFS model. It's been kind of, consistent in its own thinking, staying pretty strong in that. Here is the GFS, the American model that we also look at. 3 o'clock Saturday, freezing rain solidly over us most of Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. There's a pretty sharp cutoff you can see for the far southern parts of our viewing area between that chilly rain and the freezing rain. But again, it could be underdoing the cold air at this point. We get into Monday morning, it pushes out. So as far as things falling still on Monday, I don't expect that with anything falling like rain, freezing rain, ice, things like that. But there will still be some carryover, some lingering effects as we get into Monday. Let's see. 18Z for Euro shows more the same as the 12Z. Yeah, very similar to the one we got this morning. There haven't been any huge shifts with that model at this point specifically. But what I said here too is that the hurricane hunters, it's fascinating to think about. They are going up into the atmosphere off the Pacific or off the coast of California. They're going to be sampling the air that is kind of going to form this storm into the weekend. They're going to take measurements of, temperature, pressure, wind, all the above, and then that will get put into these models that we're looking at to kind of refine them. So that should be a very helpful tool into the next couple days. Let's see. Phil, yeah, no worries. That's our goal here, to keep you informed. Fayetteville, Georgia, snow or freezing rain to ice. Snow at this point, again, looks very unlikely. It always could change, but we're messaging at this point that it's going to be a freezing rain, a kind of icy mix at this point, and then if anything changes, it would lean probably more toward a chilly rain. Which one do I think more accurate, the European or the American? Let's go back to those models, and I'll tell you my thinking here. So 9 times out of 10, if you ask me that question, I lean toward the Euro. It has a very good track record, but in this specific case, based on kind of our geography here in this part of the country, we have, of course, the North Georgia mountains. We have the Appalachians, to where we can get cold air pushed up against those mountains that the European may not be picking up on. And sometimes it struggles with that. So in this case, I think kind of a middle ground between them. I think the GFS is doing better with showing the freezing rain potential longer and kind of lingering like our original expectation was. But I do think we're not necessarily going to see all of us locked into freezing rain for the entire time. I think there will be periods where our temperatures hover maybe a little bit closer to that chilly rain, and then we still have an icing concern if those temps move at all. A degree or two will affect that big time. Temp's going to be cold enough Monday where anything that fell at all turns to ice, especially in the morning, yes. By the afternoon, we get some sunshine. It's still going to be cold. I think by the afternoon, we can make some progress with that. But the morning, for sure, we will still have some concerns. How many models do you like for forecasting? It's interesting. So we have so many. There's the European, there's the American, there's a Canadian, there's a UK model. There are so many that we have to take into account. We think a lot of times about the European, the GFS as kind of being the forefront, but we take into account all of those other models to kind of come up with what we're thinking. And at this point, it's been a forecast where we've had to do that and kind of narrow this down. How much ice do I think Douglasville is going to get? So let's go back to the icing graphic. I'm going to show you that here. Put this into motion. Again, the snow totals, they're going to be well to our north. This is not a snow system for us at this point. It would take a pretty big shift and a pretty big injection of colder air to change that, change our thinking. Here is the chance, though, of a 1/4 inch of ice. Right now, because there are still little wobbles that we keep seeing, it is too early to say we're going to get this exact amount of ice in this specific spot. So I like this graphic because look at North Carolina, for instance. It continues to highlight a pretty significant chance for at least a 1/4 inch of ice. But you notice how that dips down here into Georgia, especially North Georgia, Gainesville, Blairsville. That is the percentage chance here this weekend of getting at least a 1/4 inch of ice. If we get even less than that, we'll still see some issues. So just keep that in mind. I think the farther south you go, the warmer, relatively speaking, it's going to be. Keep in mind, too, with this system, it has to be 32 degrees at the surface or below to get any liquid moisture to freeze on contact. If it's 34, we're just going to see a really, really, really chilly rain versus freezing rain. Let's see. Sunday at 1 p.m. in Atlanta. This is a very good point. So the Euro on Sunday, some spots are showing temperatures in the 50s. The GFS, the other one, 30s. So that is kind of why, first of all, we can't put out amounts yet. It's just not responsible, first of all, to say we're going to get this when it's likely to still be tweaked a little bit as we go through the next day or so. The European at this point, I think, is skewing a little warm based on our geography with the cold air that we likely will get pushed up against the mountains. I think it could be underdoing that. We will see, though, as we get closer. Even for Tennessee and North Carolina, maybe mostly, if not all, ice. Yeah, so that's a good point. Let's go back to the snow graphic here. Because originally, in a place like North Carolina, they were looking at some significant snow, like over 1 foot of snow. And at this point, the trend has been for that to inch a little farther north, and that has taken their snow totals way down and bumped up the icing potential. So you can see there, 9 o'clock Saturday evening, similar to us, look at all the pink that's showing up. They're looking at that freezing rain concern. We're still looking at that into early Sunday morning. Notice the green, though, on this model. You can see that's what I've been talking about. It's trying to pick up a little pocket of warmer air and keep that as some rain closer to Nashville. I think at this point that's still a bit of an outlier. It'd be hard to get that push of warm air that far north. Could it happen? Yes, but that's something we're going to need to continue to refine. All right. Any other questions? I'm going to get a drink of water here, keep chugging along on this Wednesday evening. Even for Tennessee, yep, based on the Euro, East Point looked like Saturday and Sunday. Let's run through this one more time here on the Euro if you are just joining us. Because historically, it does do a pretty good job, but I'm adding that disclaimer of I think it might be underdoing the cold. So there's the European model, the 7 o'clock time frame Saturday morning. We're still dry at that point. If you have any plans early Saturday, you're totally fine. I think the grocery, for instance, might be a little bit packed Saturday morning, but we go through the afternoon into the evening. That's when we're looking at some impacts starting to kind of pop up there on the map, especially Saturday night. We get into Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. Again, with the disclaimer with this model, all of the green that you see, I don't necessarily think that is all going to be straight chilly rain. I think the freezing rain line could extend a little bit farther south. And so what we're stressing, what I want you to be prepared for, is if that indeed happens. So we're taking that pretty seriously. Just make sure, keep things charged up, keep groceries in the house, pet food, things like that as we go through the weekend. All right, let's check other comments. May see some models fold bad. Yes, that is always a possibility. How much anticipation is there in your forecast from the flight data from the Hurricane Hunter flight? I'd be lying, I think, if I said most meteorologists were not excited for that. It's going to be very helpful to get that data into the models. It's always better to have current observation data that they can physically measure and put into the model versus the model thinking, it may be this temperature, maybe this temperature, and kind of guessing. So that will hopefully be very helpful. Showing snow Sunday north of Atlanta. So at this point, the snow potential, like I said, very limited. I think that's going to be mostly focused well to our north. So I'm going to run through this one more time. There's the European. You can see again the freezing rain. Look how far north the blue is showing up there with the snow, Cincinnati, St. Louis. It would take a major shift south, which I don't see happening at this point, for that snow to get really anywhere close to us. So based on the way our atmosphere is set up right now, you can think of it kind of above our heads, a big old column of air. Most of that is above freezing. What we're looking at as far as the freezing rain concern is right at the surface, there's a sliver that this is going to be cold enough to where that rain could freeze on contact and get some freezing rain. So that's what we're looking at. I don't think this is going to be a snowstorm at this point. How often do you get updated models? Is it hourly? Yes. So we get them, it depends on the model, basically every 5-6 hours or so. And that's going to be something. We'll probably get another set here just before midnight, shortly after, of our most trusted ones. No dumb questions at all. All right. Well, with that said, we're going to continue to track this very closely. Something we're watching here through the next couple days. We're going to have more streams coming at you. Make sure to stay tuned, and we will just see where it goes. But again, we're watching it closely. The whole First Alert weather team is. I appreciate you tuning in, and have a great rest of your night.